Good morning, dear friends. My name is Igor Yakovenko. It is now 7 hours 43 minutes in Kiev. Today, on this Saturday, March 9th, we continue our deep morning reflection on everything that is currently happening in Russia, in the world, within Ukraine, and deep inside our own souls. Well, the main event, although in truth it is hard to say exactly where the most significant event is happening right now, but nevertheless, let me put it this way. The most resonant and consequential events are currently unfolding in the Middle East, capturing the world's attention. Perhaps the most significant news remains the fact that the election of the new Rabar has finally taken place and his name has been officially announced. This development is particularly striking because it directly contradicts the recent report suggesting that the authorities, those 88 members of the assembly, had not yet reached a final decision. The Iranian clerics who elected the new Rahbar had initially suggested they intended to keep his identity a complete secret, but no, they are not actually going to do that after all. There will be no Goodwin the Great and Terrible. There is no reason for him to hide his face anymore. No, they certainly will not keep it a secret. It is now widely known exactly who it is. The official Assembly of Experts of the Islamic Republic of Iran has formally elected Mojtaba Hosseini Khamenei to serve as the new supreme leader of Iran, holding the prestigious title of the Rahbar. Mojtaba Khamenei is the influential son of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This represents an unprecedented moment in the history of this Islamic theocratic republic, marking the first time that the son of the country's leader succeeds his father in such a powerful role. So, what are the implications of this shift for the future of the nation? Well, I can say right away that, in my view, from what we know about this person, and we don't know much, but still it's a considerable amount. Right now, a lot of information is coming out about him. The prevailing hypothesis that he will be some kind of Gorbachev-like figure who will gradually soften the regime and make it more humane. Well, for now, there is very little evidence or reason to think so. He is a sort of shadow leader, working from the shadows. He was very much that kind of person during the years of his father's rule, a man who famously never spoke in public. The only real exceptions were those theological seminars, which were the only times he would ever address an audience. However, he is actually quite well known across the region, widely recognized for the specific fact that he truly made his mark and established his reputation during the brutal suppression of the widespread mass protests that took place throughout the country back in the year 2009. And it is widely believed that it was he who led the IRGC at that time, or at least under his leadership. The IRGC brutally suppressed those protests. Right after that, it was precisely then that Ali Khamenei finally and completely handed over the nation of Iran to the complete control of the IRGC security forces. And moreover, it was at that time that these security forces gained full control over the economy. That is, well, again, speaking of the numbers, the current range of figures is truly enormous right now. And I'm waiting for a conversation with Mikhail Ivanovich Krutikin. Perhaps he will be able to clarify things for us. But the spread is such that the IRGC's share of GDP, according to the most conservative official estimates, is no less than 25%, while the opposition claims it's 70%. So, in any case, the vast and powerful influence of these fewer than 200,000 people in a country with a massive population of over 90 million like Iran is that they really do effectively control a very significant part of the entire national economy. And the fact that IRGC members after that, this shift occurred primarily after the suppression of the 2009 protests under the leadership of the new Rahbar. So in terms of his relative age, he is essentially considered an adolescent in political terms because he is only 56 years old. And of course, he differs from his predecessors, those elderly people who are currently in their 90s and are the ones running Iran. So in fact, he definitely stands out here. But I want to take a moment to emphasize once more that what is currently known about him does not provide us with any solid grounds to say that, well, regarding his youth, I understand it's quite funny to talk about the youth of a 56-year-old man. But let's still look at the actual current realities of the world today. Putin, for example, is much the same. Then there is Trump, and of course the long-standing traditions of Iran. After all, 56 years old is basically just a youngster by those specific standards. So the truly critical question now, of course, is how he will be able in this specific situation when, in general, the regime is clearly being hit with exceptionally forceful and devastating blows to effectively manage and navigate through such a crisis. Its economy is being destroyed, its military potential is being wiped out, and leaders, including those of the security forces, are constantly being eliminated. How long will he be able to keep the regime from collapsing? It is difficult to say with any certainty for now, but still we must consider the significant fact that this particular person is a prominent and clear symbol of the merging of the IRGC with various other powerful entities. When we look closely at the complex administrative structure, the established clerical hierarchy, and the current state of the economy, there is a great deal of reason to believe that in general those 88 prominent religious leaders who elected him probably made the most appropriate choice from their own point of view, especially when it comes to the vital task of preserving the stability of the regime. Apparently this person really can do something. So there are many critics, a large number of vocal critics, who fundamentally believe that hereditary rule within the system is essentially a direct move toward a form of monarchy. And we remember that the 1979 revolution, the historic overthrow of the Shah's regime in Iran, was mainly a significant and widespread revolt against the monarchy. Well, that is a very important and key point to remember. This matter is currently being discussed both within the borders of Iran and, in general, even among the dedicated supporters who favor maintaining this regime. And there are two more crucial factors to take into account. First, we really do not know what this person is like in reality or what his private thoughts and motivations might be. But the main factor that it naturally leads one to view such a somewhat ironic slogan with a significant amount of skepticism. The supreme leader is dead, long live the supreme leader. The real point of the matter is that he is now squarely in the crosshairs. And literally, I don't remember the exact date, but just within the past week or so, the Israeli defense minister stated that whoever becomes the successor to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei will be an unequivocal target for elimination. And Donald Trump preemptively, back when the potential candidacy of this Mojtaba was first being floated as the eventual successor to Ali Khamenei, stated quite clearly that no, he doesn't like him at all, and that he would personally choose another person entirely. Well, I'm not currently aware of Trump's actual ability to influence the internal process of selecting the new supreme leader of Iran, but most likely, right here, the truly decisive and final role will be played by the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli Special Services, and the precision of Israeli missiles. I think the likelihood of the new supreme leader being eliminated is quite high. But taking everything into account, the war continues. For now, at least for the time being, there is really no hope for a speedy conclusion to this war. However, today we have put this question up for a vote with you. This question is on the website in the YouTube recording section. Well, honestly, it was put together in a hurry. So there are some inaccuracies in this poll, but I think we will repeat it and tweak it a bit more. At the end of the first part of our conversation, I will announce the results. One more important, as it seems to me, a very complex story that truly deserves a deep discussion is that if you take away all the intense emotions, if you completely remove the raw emotions, which personally I am constantly overflowing with, and I sincerely hope I'm not the only one here, what is commonly called the Ukraine-Hungary conflict. So I try to stay very restrained, grit my teeth, and simply say the Ukraine-Hungary conflict. In reality, this is a significant story about how Viktor Orban is openly in front of the whole world trying to do something quite specific. Strangle Ukraine. He is strangling it, pressing down with his heavy belly. Now, I repeat, this is an extremely undiplomatic statement from the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, but I am able to say it. It really is a truly repulsive and disgusting sight, like this giant, hideously bloated and oversized toad trying to strangle Ukraine. I'm not a diplomat, so I can say things like this. So here is the simple truth of the matter. Well, there are three separate things we're discussing in this context here. First, it specifically concerns Viktor Orban in a bandit-like manner. As a result of a gangster-style attack, he stole cash and gold bars that he forcibly confiscated during the detention of Ukrainian cash couriers. Furthermore, it is important to highlight that the statement claiming this is a suspicion of illegal money laundering stands in direct contradiction to the undeniable fact that all the Hungarian cash couriers, who in theory should have been detained and thoroughly questioned in connection with the suspected crime, for reasons that remain entirely unexplained, were simply deported back to Ukraine. Strange logic, wouldn't you agree? So, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy Sybiha, officially characterized the current situation as an unprecedented act of state banditry and racketeering, an assessment that is undeniably accurate. So, the fact that this money has absolutely no connection whatsoever to Hungary is obvious. The fact that it belongs to the State Bank of Ukraine and therefore to Ukrainian taxpayers is something that is also completely and absolutely clear. So, well, the Ukrainian bank itself formally requested and demanded the money be returned, but naturally nothing at all has happened in response. So, what exactly are we talking about here? What is currently known about this situation? This significant transportation of physical money and gold bars through the sovereign territory of Hungary was carried out as a direct result of an open, publicly known international agreement between the Ukrainian Oshad Bank and Raiffeisen Bank located in Austria. That is to say, the cargo itself was fully processed and handled in strict accordance with all existing international transportation regulations and legal standards. All customs procedures were successfully finalized. Whose money it is, where the money is going, and where it came from are all clear. If Hungary has any questions, they simply could have been easily asked, but in this case, Viktor Orban has upcoming elections scheduled for April 12th, and quite obviously Orban is currently using absolutely everything related to the situation in Ukraine for his own political election campaign. Consequently, his rhetoric right now is becoming extremely harsh, intensely anti-Ukrainian, and remarkably rude in its delivery. He states that Hungary will pressure Ukraine to resume negotiations. He openly admits that his reasoning is not based on simple suspicions of money laundering or financial misconduct. In reality, the situation is far more complex than that, and he is being quite transparent about his true intentions at this stage. It's complete nonsense, openly so. The man explains that the main goal is to pressure Ukraine into repairing the Druzhba oil pipeline, which was severely damaged by a Russian missile strike. He further notes that this is a deliberate attempt to force the restoration of the energy flow through the region. He is not mincing his words. He explicitly states they will be forced, meaning he is not prepared to make any concessions. These negotiations are absolutely not about making any compromises, and initially it was a clear case of blackmail, because firstly, there is the recent veto that was imposed on the 90 billion euros that the European Union had specifically allocated for Ukraine. Secondly, there is the matter of the 20th package of anti-Russian sanctions. So this is blackmail not only with the financial loan for Ukraine, which of course is clearly non-repayable, but also with direct and open support for Russia. And finally, outright banditry. One of the most significant and pressing problems is that, of course, there was a widespread and genuine hope that with the elections scheduled to occur on April 12th, a new government would finally step in and fundamentally change its current policy direction. Well, first of all, Peter Magyar has already clearly stated that he, so to speak, is also very deeply offended by the recent statements of Ukrainian President Zelensky. So this anti-Ukrainian political stance may continue. But secondly, and most importantly, just recently, Slovakia officially joined forces with Hungary in this regard. That is, Robert Fico, he made a statement that his country, Slovakia, will also exercise its right to a veto regarding the proposed European loan package, specifically concerning these 90 billion euros. So once again, the primary reason for this is if the current leadership in Ukraine is refusing to reinstate the flow of vital oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline. So, once again, there is hope that firstly, Orban will lose the April elections, but it is not something that is 100% certain. To be perfectly honest, I truly have no idea and cannot predict what will happen if Orban ends up losing these upcoming elections. This is because, well, since Orban is fighting in these elections not only for his political power, but also for his personal freedom, because the likelihood is that if he loses, he will likely end up behind bars in prison. It is therefore quite clear that given Orban's established habits, I certainly do not rule out a Belarusian scenario unfolding. Again, we cannot predict right now the actual results of the elections. Nevertheless, the strong possibility that he will resort to falsification, to violence, and will in fact continue to lead his country completely out of the group of countries that can be considered at least somewhat democratic is quite high. It is hard to say what will happen in this situation. Will the European Union continue to turn a blind eye to the fact that in the center of Europe, there is not just a mafia state, but also an absolute usurper? Well, it's very hard to say, especially since we cannot predict to what extent, well, let's say, if Orban starts losing, how exactly he will lose. If we are talking about someone like Lukashenko, then yes. But the fact that for Orban this is, as it's now commonly said, an existential situation, a matter of life and death, is becoming increasingly obvious to everyone. So the situation is extremely dire at this moment. Orban has explicitly stated that, well, at this moment I am going to attempt to quote exactly what he said. Let me find my notes. We want to know what Ukrainians are doing with this huge sum of money in Hungary. Well, the man is mocking. He's just openly mocking. What do they want? What are Ukrainians doing with this huge sum? They're taking it to Ukraine, Orban. They're taking it to Ukraine officially, legally from Austria to Ukraine through Hungary. Well, that's just the geography, you see. Well, it seems Orban is completely pretending to be a fool, just trying to act like he doesn't understand the situation at all. In other words, he intends to strangle Ukraine. And he openly and very frankly says so to everyone. Here's another quote. So, this is his direct quote. So, in the end, I'll put it this way: they will exhaust their financial resources well before we do. No, they certainly will not do that. To put it in much simpler terms, it is a completely blatant desire to strangle an independent European country that is currently suffering a devastating and monstrous blow from the Russian fascist Reich. During this same period of time, the situation is developing in such a way that, so far, despite the fact that I've spoken with many different experts recently, I had a very interesting and insightful conversation with Roman Vladimirovich Tsimbalyuk. By the way, I think I would really like to meet with him periodically in the future because he's really quite, well, I think Tsimbalyuk is truly one of those influential mainstream Ukrainian figures. By the way, if you look down in the comments section below, Ukrainian subscribers, I would ask you to evaluate this hypothesis. So I think that Let's put it this way: Vitaly Portnikov represents one perspective, a Ukrainian one. Mikhail Mikhailovich Podolyak is another. That's already just the official viewpoint from the president's office. And as for the journalist Roman Vladimirovich Tsimbalyuk, I get the very strong impression that his viewpoint represents the mainstream Ukrainian perspective. Evaluate this hypothesis. What do you personally think about this from your own point of view? So, when looking at this situation through Ukrainian eyes, would you say it is more through Tsimbalyuk's eyes or Portnikov's or perhaps Podolyak's? By the way, that is actually a very interesting and complex question to consider. And for me, it is a very significant one. Nevertheless, I have talked to absolutely everyone, Fedorov and many others as well, and with Lipsitz too. And well, looking now at the sudden surge in global oil prices, we can see that oil prices have jumped by over 30% in just 1 week, according to the latest reported numbers. That is the current situation. They have already exceeded $100, but actually for a while now, and especially as of this morning, the price is still climbing. Brent crude oil, Brent, has risen to $107 per barrel. So, in reality, the total increase over the week is 30%. And if the vital shipping lane known as the Strait of Hormuz remains completely closed to traffic until the very end of March, then global oil prices are currently being predicted by market analysts to reach levels somewhere in the range of unprecedented highs, exceeding $150 per barrel. The reason I mention this is because in conversations with various industry experts, somehow they do not see any serious consequences in this. But I think it is very serious. I think it is providing significant wind in Putin's sails. It is the preservation of the Putin regime. All this talk about him wavering or being unstable. I've heard from highly respected experts a hypothesis that they're planning to replace him. I personally don't think so. I just don't think that's happening. I don't see any signs of it at all. And most importantly, this specific kind of ongoing replenishment of the Russian national budget right now directly means the tragic continuation of the war, unfortunately. That is the entire story overall. If Donald Trump, just this once in his entire life, actually manages to do something truly good, and if as a direct result of this situation, the Iranian theocratic regime is finally overthrown because of this escalating war. Well, to be honest, I think Trump will have successfully redeemed the majority of his sins, and then they should just go ahead and give him the Nobel Peace Prize. After all, it's not like the Nobel Peace Prize hasn't belonged to some truly questionable characters before. However, sadly, I am not entirely confident that this will happen in the near future. I would like to share with you the results of a poll we recently conducted. Unfortunately, I am not able to display those findings on the screen for you right now, but I hope that you'll be able to follow along just fine by ear. So the question was as follows: when will a ceasefire be declared, in parentheses, the war in Iran? And the result will be counted as yes if by the specified date, precisely at 11 o'clock and 59 minutes Kiev time, an official ceasefire agreement will have been formally concluded and signed into effect, defined as a publicly announced and mutually agreed cessation of direct military actions between the US and Iran. Consequently, these represent the specific criteria for the agreement, so 1,100 people voted. The question was asked late at night, so to put it that way, not quite as many participants as we might have initially expected in such a short period of time. But nevertheless, it is actually quite enough for the overall distribution ratio to remain perfectly stable. Consequently, the largest single group identified are the optimists. A significant 38% of them firmly believe it will happen before the deadline of March 31st. In second place are the more cautious pessimists, who firmly believe it will be before June 30th of this year. And in third place, the moderates, who think that before April 30th, 20%. and finally before May 31st, 9%. So the vast majority of people believe that the war will finally come to an end by the conclusion of this month. Well, I would be absolutely delighted and relieved if you turn out to be right. I can say right away that this poll has two very significant and distinct flaws. One is comical. It was a typo that brought a lot of joy to the commenters. I accidentally wrote April 31st. And many, well, perhaps not many, but certainly some of my subscribers were very amused by this mistake. I am very happy that my typos and occasional slips of the tongue can bring you these moments of joy. Well, I suppose I will just have to make these slips of the tongue more often so that you can smile. The second problem with this poll is that because I was in such a tremendous rush, which is a truly unfortunate mistake, I failed to include an extremely skeptical answer option, namely that this war will continue to drag on for a very long and indefinite period of time. There you have it. And that's my unforgivable sin as a sociologist. The scale turned out to be invalid. Well, you know how it is. Anything can happen. This is, of course, a mistake. It's the result of rushing. But nevertheless, I think these are important results. We captured the mood. That is, 38% believe that the war will end this month. That's a rather optimistic result.